What if, in a single instant, her life changed forever? Paula was just a cleaning lady, exhausted after another endless shift. But when she took a quick nap in the wrong place, the bathroom of the hotel's most luxurious suite, she woke up to the furious shout of the most powerful man in the place, Robson Carter, the millionaire. Resignation? That's the least she could have expected, but instead, Robson did something unexpected. Something that put her at the center of a world she never imagined she would belong to. What began as a simple mistake soon became a dangerous game of provocations, challenges, and forbidden feelings. What happens now? Now Paula has to decide, run away while she can, or risk everything for a man she has never allowed herself to love. You're not prepared for what comes next. Paula could barely keep her eyes open. Her body was screaming for rest, but she ignored her tiredness. Working double shifts had become routine, especially after her friend Jessica started making excuses for missing work. Now, there she was, her muscles tense and her head throbbing, scrubbing the floor with mechanical movements. The last suite of the day was more like a palace than a hotel room. The bathroom, then, was something from another world. The giant mirror reflected the golden light of the chandelier, and the floor shone as if it had never been walked on. "Who needs such luxury to take a bath?" she mumbled, trying to stay awake. She forced herself to continue. She bent down to clean a corner and felt her muscles protest. The weight of her body seemed to double, and dizziness took over her vision. He took a deep breath and blinked rapidly. Just a few more minutes, and she would be free. But his body had already made up its mind. Her eyes rested on the toilet seat, so inviting in that moment of exhaustion. "Just a minute," she whispered, supporting her arms and head, and then he blacked out. Robson entered the suite with firm steps. The day had been a living hell, full of endless meetings and strategic decisions. His only wish was for a hot bath and absolute silence. He threw his jacket on the armchair, loosened his tie, and walked to the bathroom. He opened the door without even looking around. And then he stopped. A figure was asleep on the toilet seat. His heart leapt before his mind could process what he was seeing. A woman wearing a hotel uniform was breathing softly, completely oblivious to his presence. "What the—" Her voice echoed through the luxurious bathroom. Paula awoke with a jolt. "Ah!" She tried to get up too quickly and ended up knocking over the cleaning bucket, which banged loudly against the floor. "Who are you? What are you doing in my bathroom?" Robson's voice was deep, full of disbelief. Paula's eyes widened at the sight of him, tall, dark, with a face creased by tiredness, but undeniably charming. The problem was that he didn't look happy at all. I... Her mind was racing, trying to find a plausible excuse. Looking around, she realized there was no way out. "I was testing the ergonomics of the bathroom." Robson blinked, not believing what he had heard. Testing what? The ergonomics. After all, a high-end bathroom needs to offer comfort down to the smallest detail. A heavy silence fell. Robson crossed his arms, analyzing her. "Do you really expect me to believe that?" Paula swallowed. "It depends. Would that save me from being fired?" The CEO exhaled slowly, wiping his hand across his face. He should call security, but something about that woman intrigued him. Without saying anything, he turned and left the bathroom. Paula blinked, confused. What had just happened? She followed him hesitantly, finding him in the suite's kitchen making coffee. "Do you drink coffee?" he asked without looking at her. Paula's eyes widened. "Is this some kind of prank?" Robson raised an eyebrow. "Do you accept or not?" She hesitated for a second. Her instinct told her that accepting would be safer. I like coffee." "Good. Then get a cup." She held the china with trembling fingers. The strong smell of coffee helped take her mind off the shock of the absurd situation she found herself in. "Do you always offer coffee to people who break into your bathroom?" Robson let out a dry laugh. "No, But you're a special case. Paula snorted. Oh, what an honor. She took a sip of her coffee and felt the full-bodied taste in her mouth. She frowned. This coffee is Colombian Arabica with notes of dark chocolate and a slight hint of caramel. Robson narrowed his eyes. How do you know that? Paula shrugged. I love coffee. With the amount I consume, I think I can consider myself an expert. He watched her for a moment, thoughtful. You have a refined palate. Paula laughed nervously. And that means I'm not fired. Robson took a sip of coffee before answering. I haven't decided yet. So, why are we having coffee instead of you kicking me out? He leaned forward slightly. Because I want to make you an offer. Paula felt a shiver run down her spine. A proposition? I need someone with a refined palate for an important event taking place at the hotel. She winked. And you want me to take part? Robson nodded. I want you to help me test the dishes. Your honesty could be useful. Paula laughed in disbelief. So, instead of being fired, you're offering me a temporary job? Exactly. She analyzed his serious expression, trying to find some hidden catch. What if I say no? Robson sipped his coffee. Well, then I'll have to reconsider staying at the hotel, Paula sighed, feeling trapped. That's great. Looks like I don't have a choice. He smiled sideways. Clever. Tomorrow, 7 in the morning, main hall. 7. But my shift ends at 6. Then go straight there. She rolled her eyes. Good. Nothing like ending a night sleeping in a bathroom and starting the next day testing luxury dishes. Robson laughed quietly. Welcome to the world of challenges, Paula. She snorted, taking the last sip of coffee before getting up. If I survive this, I deserve a prize. Robson tilted his head. Let's see if you can take it. And with that sentence, Paula realized that her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. Paula didn't know which was worse, the accumulated tiredness or the anxiety at having been called to an event that clearly wasn't for someone like her. Her shift ended at 6 in the morning, but instead of going home and throwing herself on the bed, she dragged herself into the hotel's main hall. The place was in chaos. Staff were running around, organizers were shouting orders, chefs were carrying trays full of exquisite dishes. That evening's event would bring together high-level investors and food critics. Paula tried to go unnoticed, but a deep voice made her body cringe. You're late. She turned slowly and found Robson with his arms crossed, wearing an impeccable suit and a sharp look on his face. Technically, I'm not. I just arrived after the scheduled time. That's exactly what being late means. She sighed. My shift ended an hour ago. I need a coffee and maybe 5 hours of sleep before I can process anything. We don't have time for drama. Come with me. She snorted, but followed him. Robson took her into the hotel's main kitchen. The atmosphere was intense, with the sound of clanging pots and voices debating cooking techniques. In the center of the confusion, a tall, burly man was tasting a sauce with a concentrated expression. Paula, this is Romeo, the chef in charge of the event. The man gave her a suspicious look. Are you the last-minute helper? Paula arched her eyebrows. I'm, let's say, a temporary gastronomic consultant. Romeo laughed, clearly debauched. That's great. Now anyone can judge food. Robson interrupted. She has a refined palate. I want you to try the dishes and tell me what you think. Romeo crossed his arms. Really? And since when does the hotel need the opinion of a... Robson's eyes flashed with a silent warning. Since now. The chef snorted, picked up a spoon and handed it to Paula. All right. Gastronomic consultant. Try this. She took the spoon and tried the sauce. The taste filled her mouth, but something was wrong. Too salty, she said, frowning. The main flavor of the dish is being overshadowed. The chef stared at her. Are you saying I got the seasoning wrong? I'm saying that any guest will only taste the salt and not the dish. Romeo laughed scornfully. Of course. The cleaner now knows more than me, an award-winning chef. Paula felt her face blush, but before she could reply, Robson spoke up. Try it for yourself, Romeo. The chef took another spoonful and tried it. His face closed up. Humph. There may be a slight exaggeration in the salt. Paula crossed her arms. Ahem. Romeo snorted but went back to stirring the pot. All right, I'll adjust it. Robson gave Paula a satisfied look. Great job. She rolled her eyes. Believe me, I'd rather be asleep than arguing with an angry chef. But you're here. That means you want to prove that you deserve this chance. Paula opened her mouth to deny it, but something in his expression made her hesitate. She wanted it. For the first time, she wanted to show that she could be more than just an invisible employee, and that was scary. Hours later, the event began. The hall was impeccable, with elegant lights and perfectly arranged tables. Paula circulated discreetly, watching the guests try the dishes she had helped to perfect. So it's true. She turned and found Martina, the hotel receptionist, with a curious smile on her lips. You and Mr. Carter. You and Mr. Carter. Paula choked. No, everyone's talking about it. He took you away from cleaning to stand next to him at the event. That has nothing to do with it. He just saw that I know coffee and decided to test me with the dishes. Martina raised an eyebrow. Of course, because millionaire CEOs always pull cleaners out of nowhere to be food consultants. Paula snorted, crossing her arms. Really? Well, I hope it is, but you know how rumors go. And with that, Martina walked away, leaving Paula with a bitter taste in her mouth. As she walked around the room, she noticed something that made her stomach turn. Across the room, a stunning woman was laughing softly as she talked to Robson. She touched him on the arm with every word, leaning closer. What's worse, he didn't seem to mind. Paula felt a strange discomfort in her chest. I don't care, she muttered to herself. But even as she repeated this, her eyes kept returning to the scene. And then the mysterious woman did something that made her heart race. She grabbed Robson's wrist and whispered something in his ear. He simply nodded. Paula clenched her fists. She turned sharply, and in the process bumped into a waiter. The sound of glass shattering on the floor silenced the entire room. Everyone looked at her, including Robson. His face was unreadable, but Paula felt a warmth rising to her ears. I have to get out of here, she whispered. And without looking back, she left the hall. Paula hurried through the hotel corridors, her pulse racing. Everyone's gaze on her was still burning in her mind. Knocking over a glass of champagne at a fancy event was the sort of thing she would do, of course. She rubbed her face in frustration. It wasn't the mistake itself that annoyed her. It was the motive. She didn't even want to admit it. But she knew that the tightness in her chest had a first and last name. Robson Carter. Or rather, Robson Carter and that mysterious woman. She took a deep breath, trying to push the thoughts away, but as he turned into the corridor that led to the backstage exit, he heard firm footsteps approaching. His body froze before he even had to look. Paula! She closed her eyes for a second. Robson's voice was low but firm. She turned around slowly. He was standing there, impeccable as always, but with something different in his eyes. What happened in there? He asked. She crossed her arms. An accident. You saw it. I'm not talking about the cup. I want to know what made you leave like that. Paula let out a humorless laugh. Oh, so now you read minds? I don't need to read minds to realize that something's bothering you. She looked away, feeling her heart hammering against her ribs. Nothing bothered me. I was just overwhelmed. Robson narrowed his eyes, clearly not convinced. If there's one thing I've learned about you, Paula, it's that your mouth lies, but your face can't fake it. She snorted. And what exactly do you want me to say? Robson was silent for a moment, as if choosing his words. If this has to do with the woman I was talking to, it doesn't, Paula interrupted too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. It doesn't? She gritted her teeth, feeling her face heat up. "You can talk to whoever you want. It has nothing to do with me." Robson's gaze remained fixed on hers. "Good. Then we're clear." Paula opened her mouth to retort, but closed it again. Was he really not going to deny it? Wasn't he going to explain? The discomfort inside her grew. Robson took a deep breath. "You did a great job today. Despite whatever took you away from the salon, your opinion helped make this event a success." Paula bit her lip. "Thank you." He nodded. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." And then, without giving her time to reply, he turned and left. Paula stood there, trying to understand why she felt worse than before. The next morning, Paula tried to act as if nothing had happened. She threw herself into her work, cleaning the hotel's common areas and avoiding any unnecessary contact with Robson. But it was clear that the universe wasn't going to make it easy. "Paula, Mr. Carter wants to see you in his office." She froze. Martina, who was passing by, smiled mischievously. "If I were you, I'd wear nice lipstick." Paula rolled her eyes. "God, Martina, give me a break." She made her way to Robson's office, feeling her anxiety grow with every step. When she entered, he was leaning back in his leather chair, analyzing something on his tablet. When he saw her, he slid the device to one side. "Sit down." She obeyed, keeping her hands restlessly in her lap. "Is something wrong?" Robson crossed his fingers on the table. "You've been offered a job." Her stomach dropped. "What?" He slid her an envelope. Paula took it, still not understanding. When she opened it, she found a formal letter from a competing hotel, offering her a position in the events and gastronomy department. Her heart raced. How did you get my name?" "Yesterday's event put you on the radar of some influential people." She blinked, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. "So, they're offering me a better job?" Robson didn't look away. "It seems so." Paula bit her lip. It was a much higher salary than she was currently earning, a real opportunity for growth, but then why was there a lump in her throat? "And you want me to accept?" Robson's silence was heavy. "I want you to do what's best for you." Paula felt her stomach turn. "I see." Robson's face was impassive. "You have time to think." She stood up, holding the envelope tightly. "I think I have." And before he could say anything, he turned and left. Over the next few days, Paula tried to convince herself that accepting the proposal was the right choice. But then, why did every fiber of her body resist this decision? Why, whenever she saw Robson in the corridors, did she feel that suffocating doubt growing? And worst of all, why did she expect him to give her a reason to stay? Paula wanted to convince herself that she had made the right decision. She spent the next few days telling herself that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. But deep down, something didn't fit. And she knew exactly why. Or rather, the person. Worst of all, Robson didn't seem shaken. At least, he didn't show it. He remained impassive, professional, as if his possible departure from the hotel meant absolutely nothing to him. And that hurt more than he'd like to admit. "Have you signed the contract with the other hotel?" Jessica's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Paula looked at her friend, who was leaning against the counter in the cafeteria, holding a cup of coffee. "Not yet." "So, what's with the wake face?" Paula sighed. "Because I don't know if I want to go." Jessica arched an eyebrow. "Friend, it's a much bigger salary. A better position. What's stopping you?" Paula remained silent. Jessica sipped her coffee and then smiled sideways. "Oh, I get it. Got what? You don't want to go because of him," Paula snorted. "This has nothing to do with Robson." "Really?" Jessica leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. "So if I tell you to sign now, without hesitation, will you do it?" Paula opened her mouth and closed it again. Jessica laughed. "That's what I thought." Before Paula could answer, one of the reception staff rushed into the cafeteria. Paula, Mr. Carter wants to see you in his office. Right away. Paula felt her stomach turn. Jessica smiled. Look at that. Take care, huh? Paula gave her friend an ugly look before leaving. When she entered the office, Robson was standing by the window, looking out at the city. Did you close with the other hotel? The question was direct. Paula crossed her arms. Not yet. Robson turned around slowly. What's stopping you? She bit her lip, irritated by the cold way he asked. I don't know. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. And what do you want, Paula? The question took her by surprise. What do you want? I want to hear from you. What do you want to do? Paula hesitated. Her heart was screaming one thing. Her logic said something else. But before she could answer, someone knocked on the door. Mr. Carter, Mr. Claudio is demanding to speak to the person in charge of the event. Paula frowned. Claudio? Robson sighed. One of the guests. He seems to want to cause a fuss. He gestured for her to follow him. When they reached the hall, Claudio was standing with his arms crossed, surrounded by some staff. What's going on? Robson asked. The man turned around, looking pleased to have gotten their attention. What's happening is that I paid for an impeccable experience and received a mediocre dish. Paula crossed her arms. What was wrong with the dish? Claudio smiled sideways. Oh, so now anyone can judge the food? She didn't back down. I helped create the menu. If there's a problem, I need to know. The man looked her up and down as if trying to intimidate her. I'd say there's a pretty big problem. Robson took a step forward. If the plate really did have a problem, we can sort it out. Otherwise, I'd ask you to stop causing a fuss. Claudio laughed quietly. As you wish, Carter. But if I were you, I'd take better care of the kind of people you put next to you. Paula felt her blood boil. But before she could reply, Robson was quicker. If I were you, I'd choose my words better. His tone was cold, calculated. Claudio hesitated, then let out a debauched laugh. As you wish, but it won't be the last time you hear from me. He turned and left the room. Paula exhaled, trying to contain her anger. He wanted to cause a scandal for no reason. Robson agreed. And you handled it well. Paula looked at him. Do you really think so? Robson held her gaze. Yes, and that's why I don't want you to go. Her heart raced. What? He took a deep breath. I don't want you to go to the other hotel. Paula blinked. Why? He hesitated for a second, as if weighing up his words. Because you're important to this hotel. She felt something tighten in her chest. Just for the hotel? Robson remained silent. Paula stepped forward. Tell me the truth, Robson. Do you really want me to stay just because I'm useful at work? He kept his eyes fixed on hers. No, I don't. Her heart raced. Robson Carter was never vague. He never left anything open. And at that moment, he didn't need to say any more. Paula took a deep breath. So why didn't you say it before? Because I didn't want to influence your decision. She laughed humorlessly. You don't think it did? He didn't answer. Paula felt the confusion in her chest grow even more, and she knew that, from that moment on, she could no longer pretend that everything was just professionalism. Paula never liked feeling vulnerable, but there she was, in the middle of the hotel lobby, her heart racing and her mind in complete chaos. Robson had made it clear that he didn't want her to leave, and more than that, he admitted that the reason wasn't just professional. The problem? He didn't go any further than that, and Paula didn't know if she had the courage to demand more. Over the next few days, she tried to act as if nothing had happened. But ignoring the presence of Robson Carter was impossible. Every time she saw him in the corridors, her chest tightened. Every time he looked at her too intensely, her mind went back to that conversation in the hall. She needed to sort it out, but she had no idea how. It was only when Jessica pulled her into a corner at the end of the day that Paula realized she wasn't the only one noticing her state. You're annoying me, said her friend, crossing her arms. Paula blinked, confused. What? This mute drama of yours? You've been walking around like a zombie ever since that conversation with Robson. Paula sighed, massaging her temples. I don't know what to do, Jessica snorted. Of course you do. You just don't want to admit it. Paula frowned. And what should I admit? Jessica rolled her eyes. That you're in love with him, obviously. Paula's heart leapt. I don't. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Oh no, then look me in the eye and tell me you don't have feelings for him. Paula opened her mouth and closed it. Jessica smiled victoriously. That's what I thought. Paula sighed, feeling a weight on her chest. Even if I liked him, that doesn't change anything. Why not? Because he'll never make his feelings clear. Jessica was silent for a moment. And you're going to let that stop you? Paula hesitated. And at that moment, she realized that she didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering, what if? That evening, while going over some details of the hotel's next event, Paula heard a knock on the living room door. She looked up and froze when she saw Robson standing there. We need to talk. She swallowed. About? He came in and closed the door behind him. About you. About us. Paula's heart raced. Is there an us? Robson held her gaze. If you want there to be. She felt her breathing fail. What do you want, Robson? He approached slowly, his eyes locked on hers. I want you to stay, but not just for the job. Paula held her breath. Then say it. Say what you feel. Robson was silent for a second, and then finally he said, I don't want to imagine this hotel without you. But more than that, I don't want to imagine my life without you. Paula's chest tightened, and in that instant she knew there was no turning back. The silence between them was almost deafening. Paula felt her heart hammering against her chest as Robson's confession echoed in her mind. You... Her voice came out weaker than she would have liked. He kept his eyes fixed on hers. I want you to stay, Paula. But more than that, I want you to choose to stay for yourself. She felt a lump in her throat. What if I say I'm scared? Robson took a step closer, his expression softer than ever. Then I'll say I'm scared too. Paula let out a short, nervous laugh. You? The steadfast CEO? He gave a half smile. I'm human too. She took a deep breath. I don't know what's going to happen. Neither do I, he admitted. But I know I want to find out. Paula closed her eyes for a second, allowing herself to feel everything. The fear, the anxiety, and above all, the desire to stay. Then, when she opened her eyes, she already knew her answer. I'll stay. The relief that crossed Robson's face was instantaneous. Are you sure about that? She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I've never been so sure of anything. And for the first time, it was Paula who took the final step. She leaned in, and Robson met her halfway. The kiss was soft at first, as if they were both absorbing the moment. Then it slowly deepened, loaded with everything they had held in for so long. When they broke apart, Robson leaned his forehead against hers. This means that you are now officially part of this hotel. Paula smiled. And of your life? He held her face gently. Exactly. Paula knew that challenges would come. She knew that life with Robson Carter wouldn't be simple, but at that moment, none of that mattered. She had chosen to stay, and she knew that, this time, it was the right choice.